Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. So I am the founder and CEO of Parkopedia, and I'm going to talk to you today about autonomous cars and specifically whether those vehicles will be parking themselves in the near future. So I want to start by giving you a quote from Bosch, which says, "Parking is a milestone in getting to fully automated driving. And fully automated parking will come long before fully automated driving." And so I will use this session to talk and provide you with some additional information and some stats on why we believe that's the case as well. So obviously this is coming from Bosch, which is one of the largest automotive tier ones in the world. And I'll provide you with some additional stats on the supply and demand of this equation and where this is going. But before I start, I'll tell you a little bit about Parkopedia. So Parkopedia is headquartered actually here in London. We were founded I started the company in 2007, and we are a world-leading provider of parking information and transaction services. Essentially, we allow drivers to use their car navigation systems to find and pay for parking. We do this in 75 countries. You see some of our customers listed on this slide. And we do this, as I said, on a global scale. So what I want to do now is talk about what is autonomous parking, what will we think the future will look like. So first of all, we believe there are four main components to enabling self-parking of the future. So this is the static data, dynamic data, transactions, and indoor navigation. So what I mean by these is when I say static data, I really mean information about where can the vehicle park, right? So where is that location? When is it open? What do I need to know about that particular location? Dynamic data is essentially everything that changes on a regular basis. That could be dynamic pricing. That could be, of course, availability of space. So you need to know if there is space available or not before you can park. Transaction is, as the name implies, is really the ability for the vehicle or the driver to pay or reserve a parking space ahead of their journey. Just to note, so the static data, dynamic data, and transaction is what we provide to the customers in the previous slide, right? So these are our services that are in production today. And indoor navigation, of course, our next product pillar that we're working on today is an additional component which we've identified as being necessary to enable the autonomous driving. So I've mentioned the word autonomous and autonomous valet parking, so let me define a little bit the specific use case. The use case is you as a driver drive up to your final destination or potentially a car park, whatever it might be. And instead of you handing over the keys to a valet, to a human valet, if you've ever had that experience, you give the keys and your car is driven away. Instead of you handing over the keys, the car itself takes controls and parks itself in a particular parking facility. You as a driver are then able to summon the vehicle back using your smartwatch or a smartphone. The vehicle picks you up and you drive away. Okay, so this is what we define as autonomous valet parking. Now, why do we believe that there is an opportunity for this, and how does this link up to the quote from Bosch that I've talked about? Well, first of all, if we look at the consumer demand, right? First of all, the automatic parking is the number one feature, or the most desirable ADAS feature that was identified in the survey of the German drivers. Not only was it the most requested feature, it was also the one where drivers were most comfortable handing over the control of the car. The reason for that, of course, is that the vehicle is parking itself at very low speeds, right, in a constrained environment. So instead of you trusting the car to do the driving safely at 70 miles an hour going down the freeway, the car is driving itself at 5 miles an hour in a very constrained environment. So drivers are very comfortable handing over the control, and of course, for the last 10 years, the assisted parking features that I'll talk about in a second have also become part of not just the premium vehicles, but also the mass market vehicles. So the drivers are now comfortable with some of the automatic features. So that was on the demand side. Now, on the supply side, what we see, according to BCG, the automated valet parking has the lowest cost out of all of the ADAS features, right? So of course, the most expensive is fully automated, so that goes without saying. But automated valet parking has the lowest BIM, right? So cost of that feature implementation out of all of the other features. So you have on one hand a high consumer demand and comfort of drivers using that feature. On the other hand, you have the much lower risk and much lower cost of implementing that. So you have both of these supply and demand features that essentially support the quote that we saw before. So if we look at the evolution of Park Assist, right? So it started, so I'm using Volkswagen, but of course all the other cars have quite similar features. So in the case of Volkswagen, we started with a Park Assist, what's called Park Assist Gen 1 in 2007. This is where the vehicle would essentially allow you to reverse park into a parallel parking space. Right? Then we had Gen 2 and Gen 3 come out over the next few years, and those features became increasingly sophisticated, where the vehicle is able to identify a parking space. So using the ultrasonic sensors, when the vehicle is driving at less than 40 kilometers an hour in the city center, the cars are now able to identify a parking space. They're also able to reverse not only in parallel parking space, but also do a multi-maneuver parking, which they couldn't do before. Still, all of these features, despite their increasing sophistication, are still at SAE level 1, right? The automated valet parking, of course, is a level 4 because the vehicle is actually driving itself. Yeah, because here with Park Assist Gen 1 and 2 and 3, you as a driver are still in the car. Maybe your hands are probably still on the wheel. Whereas with level 4, there is a very big jump. Yeah, so it might look nice and neat on this diagram, but fundamentally there is a very big gap in terms of the technological sophistication which is required to go, as you can imagine, from a level 1 to a level 4 feature. And that automated valet parking, which is, I think here it's called train parking, but essentially this is the autonomous parking with the vehicle parking itself fully autonomously, and this is what we're talking about. Okay. So what is Parkopedia doing that? So I already talked about that we're providing the static data, dynamic data, transactions in production, and we're building out our indoor navigation capabilities. And what we're doing for autonomous parking is we are a lead on Innovate UK project. We are working with the University of Surrey and Transport System Catapult here in the UK on developing and demonstrating full autonomous parking that I talked about by 2020. There's a number of components and parts to this multi-year project. First of all, we're building indoor parking maps, and I'll talk about that on the next slide. We're using those maps to figure out where the car is and where it needs to go. And as I also mentioned, we're actually able, or we need to be able to demonstrate this. So our final deliverable is actually a real demonstration in using a self-driving car in a real car park. On top of that, we're also working with Catapult on developing the safety case, of course, because this has to be done safely, and also considering user experience or customer experience, where we're talking to drivers and getting their perception in terms of, will you use this feature, how will you use this, how does this fit into your journey, and so on. So this is the project which have kicked off last year, and this is the project which will run until the end of, mostly until the end of 2020. So I already talked about maps and what we're doing there. So just to elaborate a little bit on that, the autonomous vehicles, despite having the sensors, so the cameras, the lidars, and everything else to detect obstacles and to be able to navigate, still require maps. Right? So you still need to know whether you need to turn left or whether you need to turn right. And it's the same situation, it's the same scenario when you're inside a car park. Because of course, yes, you have your cameras and you have your lidars, but when you enter let's say an underground parking garage, you will lose GPS signal by definition. So you've got two problems. One, you don't know where you are because you have no GPS signal. And two, you don't know where to go, right? Because unless you have a map of that parking facility, you don't know how many levels there are, you don't know if you're allowed to park in a particular level. So you need that map of indoor parking facility, just like you need an HUD map of the road network. So one of the parts of the project is developing those maps and doing that at scale. So what we're doing today is we're developing this pipeline for building those maps. We will also have completed a number of projects already with several automotive OEMs. We've delivered them, created and delivered those test maps for the use on their own vehicles. So map development is one thing, but as I said, also part of this demonstration is actually demonstrating this in a real car park. So we are working with a number of companies and organizations on that demonstration. So we've acquired a vehicle from an Oxford-based company called Street Drone. This is a Renault Twizy that you see here on the slide. What Street Drone 1 does is they modify, essentially they add the drive-by-wire capabilities to the vehicle. And drive-by-wire essentially means that you can control that vehicle, so the steering, throttling, braking through software, which is of course the essence of a self-driving car. So we have the vehicle with drive-by-wire capabilities. We're using AutoWare. AutoWare is an open source self-driving stack. So Parkopedia is a member of the AutoWare Foundation, where we contribute to promotion and development of this self-driving stack. And we're also using, obviously, you know, the lidars and the cameras, and this is Android PX2 for sensor fusion and all of that. But fundamentally, we are developing not only the mapping and the localization algorithms, but also developing in collaboration with a number of partners, the self-driving car, which we'll actually use to demonstrate the autonomous valet parking experience in the real world, in the real car park, with a real car. So to bring all of that together, we believe the autonomous valet parking is coming, and it's coming before the autonomous driving. The reason for that, as we discussed, is the consumer demand, the lower cost of producing such features, right? And as I talked about, Parkopedia is leading a consortium to develop those maps, to solve the problem of navigation and localization in the indoor environment. We're working with a number of partners like Street Drone on the vehicles and actually demonstrating that in the real world. And we're due to demonstrate this full autonomous valet parking that I've discussed in the real world with a real car on the road in 2020. So with that, I thank you for your time, and if you have any questions, I'll be happy to take those. Thank you.